وكلمته كانت واضحة، مثل ما أنا دعمت هيدا بدي أدعم إيران.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.
Good afternoon. It is Saturday, August 31st. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. UN chemical weapons inspectors investigating the alleged poison gas attack leave Damascus, but the report, they say, will take several weeks to be published. Analysts weigh in on the United States military intervention in Syria despite public and international partners' misgivings. Investigations with the suspects held over the bombings in Tripoli reveal Syrian linked to the attacks and that they were planned 7 months in advance. Syria expects a military attack at any moment, a security official says, just hours after UN experts probing a suspected gas attack blamed on the regime left the country. The departure of the UN inspectors opens a window for a possible U.S. strike after President Barack Obama on Friday gave his clearest indication yet that a military intervention was imminent. UN chemical weapons inspectors in Syria to probe an alleged poison gas attack that killed hundreds left Damascus for Beirut, having completed 4 days of site visits and evidence gathering. The experts departed their hotel in the Syrian capital this morning after having carried out a final day of inspections on Friday. The 13 inspectors, led by Ake Selstrom, were seen loading their luggage into 7 UN vehicles before setting off from their hotel. UN officials say it may take weeks to analyze the samples gathered and to present conclusions. And UN spokesperson Martin Nazirki said that the inspectors would return to the country to investigate several other alleged chemical weapons attacks that have taken place during the country's 2.5-year uprising. Saturday's pullout comes as Washington suggests that the UN investigation would have no bearing on its decision about whether to attack Syria in retaliation for the alleged attack on civilians.
All of us here in the United States, in Great Britain, and many parts of the world, there is a certain weariness given Afghanistan. There's a certain suspicion of any military action post-Iraq, and I very much appreciate that. On the other hand, it's important for us to recognize that when over 1,000 people are killed, including hundreds of innocent children, through the use of a weapon that 98 or 99% of humanity says should not be used even in war, and there is no action, then we're sending a signal that that international norm doesn't mean much. And that is a danger to our national security. And obviously, if and when we make a decision to respond, there are a whole host of considerations that I have to take into account too, in terms of how effective it is, and given the kinds of options that we're looking at that would be very limited and would not involve a long-term commitment or a major operation. We are confident that we can provide Congress all the information and get all the input that they need, and we're very mindful of that. And we can have serious conversations with our allies and our friends around the world about this, but ultimately we don't want the world to be paralyzed. And frankly, part of the challenge that we end up with here is that a lot of people think something should be done, but nobody wants to do it.
Polls show the public is largely opposed to U.S. military action, and after a conference call briefing on Thursday, some lawmakers say they are still not convinced of the need for it. Some question whether the Pentagon could afford to attack Syria after spending cuts imposed on the federal government earlier this year. Here's what analysts are saying.
The White House understands that there's war fatigue in the United States. They understand that this is not a popular military intervention in Syria. And that's why they've telegraphed this military strike so carefully, so clearly, and why they've emphasized the fact that this will be a limited military strike to reset the red line that the president set out on the use of chemical weapons specifically, and not a greater involvement in Syria's civil war. Great Britain fall out of this coalition to use military force is a difficult blow for the administration, because they're trying actively to gain international support for this operation. The more international support, the better it is, the easier it is to justify at home and abroad as well. And so losing Great Britain in that effort is going to be difficult, but the administration looks like it's going to go ahead with it anyway.
Missiles, perhaps, and a day or two of strikes is probably enough to achieve the immediate purpose of restoring deterrence of weapons of mass destruction use, and hopefully getting countries like Iran and North Korea to notice that as they pursue or consider pursuing nuclear ambitions, that President Obama's red lines towards them still mean something as well. President Assad just killed 1,500 of his own people with poison gas. He violated numerous international conventions in the process. It's a little bit regrettable in my mind that more countries aren't firmly staying with President Obama on this, but in the end, this is not a big enough U.S. response or a questionable enough set of intelligence findings about Syria's actions to really warrant a whole lot of concern about the lack of a strong international predicate. Deliberations in advance of the operation are really not going to help much. If the operation has a degree of success in the sense that it deters Assad from doing this again, and it doesn't kill a lot of people, a lot of innocent people in the process, in the end, I don't believe the administration is going to get a lot of flack from the American public, from the Congress, or from the allies. On the other hand, if they miscalculate or something goes wrong, all bets are off.
Investigations with the suspects held over the bombings in the northern city of Tripoli in Lebanon revealed Syrian links to the attacks. According to An-Nahar, the attacks were planned 7 months in advance. Now, State Commissioner to the Military Court, Judge Sa'ed, had charged on Friday Sheikh Ahmed al-Gharib and Mustafa Houri with forming a terrorist cell and an armed gang and planting explosives in the country. And he charged the head of the Tawheed Islamic movement, Sheikh Hashim Nkara, with withholding information. Sa'ed also charged Syrian Captain Muhammad Ali and Ali Khidr al-Arban with booby-trapping cars. Initial investigations revealed that the planning for the Tripoli attack started 7 months ago, saying that Gharib had met with Captain in the Syrian intelligence, Muhammad Ali, in Damascus, and Tartus in Syria. Gharib had requested that they revise the attack plan with Minkara, who in turn requested to study the issue with Syrian Security Chief Ali Mamlouk. Minkara has declined these claims. A meeting was held between Hezbollah and the Future Movement in an attempt to preserve peace and deter tension in Lebanon as the result of any possible developments in Syria. Media reports revealed that An-Nahar Daily said that indirect contacts between the two parties were held, adding that a Hezbollah affiliate held a meeting with future officials expressing willingness to exert all efforts needed to preserve calm and avoid any reactions over the unrest in Syria. The meeting left an atmosphere of relief, according to information, and was valued as a positive sign to deal with any possible repercussions on the internal arena as the result of the future developments in Syria. Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Lebanon, Ali Awad al-Siri, condemned Hezbollah's member searching of a Saudi embassy car on Thursday, saying that such a development leaves a negative impression in front of the public. He told An-Nahar no side has the right to perform the duties of the state. And he hoped that the incident would not be repeated because it violates diplomatic norms. He added he had long expressed his keenness on the kingdom's ties with Lebanon, its people and government, but the incident contradicts these strong bonds. He revealed that he had expressed his strong objection to the incident to caretaker Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour and later caretaker Premier Najib Mikati. The Saudi embassy says that it filed a complaint to the Foreign Ministry after members of the party stopped an embassy vehicle in the Gardi Sam'an area near Beirut, and the members recorded the names of the embassy employees riding in the car before allowing them to continue on their way. Coming up next, court in India finds the teenager guilty of rape and murder of student in December of last year. We've got more when we come back. Welcome back. Thousands of Egyptians opposed to military rule marched through districts of Cairo and other cities to demand the reinstatement of deposed leader Mohamed Morsi, ignoring warnings that security forces would open fire if protests turned violent. After a relative lull following the arrest of many Muslim Brotherhood leaders, the Friday rallies were the movement's biggest show of defiance since clashes 2 weeks ago in which hundreds of protesters were killed. While most protests passed peacefully, the health ministry said 6 people had been killed on Friday in fighting between protesters and local residents, including one in Port Said. Morsi supporters say that another person was also killed in Zagazig in Sharqiya Governorate. The army-backed government has arrested most of the leaders of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood since he was toppled on July 3rd, suffocating protests and all but silencing the movement that ruled Egypt for a year. And thousands of protesters in and around Baghdad in Iraq and South Iraq angrily rail against lawmakers' lavish benefits despite heavy security measures that kept many away, particularly in the capital. Demonstrators criticize lawmakers' retirement benefits in particular, which amount to thousands of dollars a month each and stand in marked contrast to the daily struggle for many Iraqis who lack even dependable electricity and sewerage services. Protests were also held in several cities in South Iraq, including the port city of Basra. Iraqi lawmakers have faced consistent criticism for their lavish pay and benefits, which are several times that of the average citizen. Demonstrations were officially barred, however, in the capital on security grounds, and protesters were surrounded by a heavy security presence where they were allowed to gather at several squares in central Baghdad. Suicide bomber kills up to 6 Afghans and wounded 20 others in an attack outside a bank in the southern city of Kandahar in Afghanistan as people were waiting to collect their salaries. Javed Faisal, spokesman for the Kandahar provincial governor, said policemen and civilians were among the victims. The attack was confirmed by Kandahar media director of the police office, Ahmed Zia Durrani, who said 5 people were killed and 22 wounded. Durrani said 7 of the wounded were policemen and the rest were civilians. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack, but Afghani officials often blame Taliban insurgents who are waging a nearly 12-year war against the U.S.-backed government of President Hamid Karzai. A court in India has found a juvenile guilty of rape and murder in connection with the gang rape of a physiotherapy student in December of last year, according to the teenager's defense lawyer and court officials. The court's official verdict in the case is due to be announced soon. The first verdict in the case comes after 4 delays since the wrapping up of testimony and legal arguments. The teenager was charged over a savage attack on a woman and her male companion on a moving bus on December 16th. The victim's mother emerged from the court in tears, saying he just got 3 years. From December onwards, he has been given 3 years. The victim's family had earlier called for the teenager to be given the death penalty, saying the juvenile justice system, which seeks to reform rather than punish, was too lenient. The gang rape of a 22-year-old photographer in the financial hub of Mumbai this month rekindled anger over the safety of women in India. A liquid ammonia leak from a refrigeration unit in a food company in China's commercial hub of Shanghai kills 15 people. The leak also sickened at least 26 others who had been sent to hospital, with 6 in critical condition. The Shanghai government said in a statement that the incident occurred shortly before midday in the city's northern district of Buashan at a cold storage unit owned by a seafood company. Photos on the website of the Ximin Evening News, a local newspaper, showed fire trucks at the scene with hoses on the ground. The government did not say whether the company's workers or people living in the urban area nearby were affected. Liquid ammonia used in refrigeration can cause destruction of lung tissue, potentially resulting in death and chemical burns on the skin, according to the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So here's a last story for you. They already endured staggering levels of street crime, but now Venezuelans have something new to fear: muggers who chop off their hair. Members of the scissor-wielding street gangs are called piranhas after the flesh-eating fish. The gangs sell the stolen hair to salons which fashion it into braids. Some disconsolate women have given up and had their long hair cut off preemptively to donate it to children who lose theirs to cancer. Vanessa Castillo cried as her pretty long jet black hair was snipped for charity, saying it is better to give it to the kids with cancer than have the piranhas steal it. Braids sold to salons for use as hair extensions can go for as much as $1,000, depending on how long, thick, and healthy the hair is. Venezuelans are so upset that the government has gotten involved, but only after media reports of harrowing stories of women in Maracaibo being beaten and robbed of their flowing manes. And that marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our headlines. UN chemical weapon inspectors investigating the alleged poison gas attack leave Damascus, but they say the report may take weeks to be published. Analysts weigh in on the United States military intervention in Syria despite public and international partners' misgivings. And investigations with the suspects held over the bombings in Tripoli reveal Syrian link to the attacks and that they were planned 7 months in advance. Those are your Saturday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a safe weekend.
كل كانت واقفة مثل ما أنا دعمت هيدا بدي أدعم إيران.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.